to introduce our guest speaker. We have Dana Timaeus, Managing Partner at the Timaeus Law Firm. Dana?
Well, it's great to be with all you folks on this solemn, dignified occasion in which we're going to talk about ethics and integrity in the four-way test. And we're able to get the benefit of distance programming via Zoom with our speaker coming in from Colorado. It's a fellow named Jim Halderman. First, let's talk about the man, and I'll try to keep up with the four-way test and try to comply with number one. Is it the truth? Truth is that he gives as good as he takes, and probably better. Mr. Halderman's a 29-year Rotarian. He's married to a Rotarian. He's a major donor, a former district governor. He's a generous giver of his services and time and talents. On the getting side, he's the recipient of the Service Above Self Award from Rotary International, which is Rotary's highest honor. He was one of the first passengers on the peace train the first time it pulled out of station for Rotary. And he circled that back around to conflict resolution and general service and ethics and conflict resolution training. And now he's a teacher of anger management classes, and he's teaching in prisons and rehab facilities and privately. And he's on the board of the largest drug and alcohol rehab program in the state of Colorado. Before that, he was a working guy, working in retail. And before that, he was working in ships and shipping. And before that, he was a musician on American Bandstand, working in part of the house band for programs like Little Richard. And if Jackie's got it, we got a picture of him from 1959. He's the guy standing bass back in the back.
Oh my God.
Then, you know, that's Jim Halderman, the man. But let's talk about Jim Halderman, the legend. And I'm going to vary a little bit from item number one, because that's the way legends work. Now, reputedly, Jim kissed the Blarney Stone twice. Now, the way I understand it is that that's probably true, but it's not because he intended to do it. The story behind the legend is that Jim laid down and he kissed the Blarney Stone. And then the dadgum stone puckered up and kissed him back. And you'll see what I mean here in a minute. I give you our speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Halderman.
I think this is the point where I just kind of get up and walk off after that introduction. You know, I had given you my mother's script, Dana, but you even expanded my mother's script on that. So I thank you very much for that. Today, we're talking about ethics. I used the analogy of a compass. As Brad knows, when he gets his boat, he's going to have to adjust his compass. And as you see on the picture, the compass, the anchor is straight up and down. It's pointing to true north, but the compass is off a little bit. And that's like many of our compasses to begin with. We have to adjust them. We have to adjust because true north is the polar north, but magnetic north is off of that. And as any sailor knows, and any of you mariners know, that a new compass has to be adjusted. And it's kind of like our ethics. Occasionally we have to adjust it to true north. So when I started out my boat dealership, along about the second year, I had a couple of employees. And in your second year of a new business, you're wondering if you going to be able to pay your rent or going to pay the employee's salary at the end of the day. And along come an insurance adjuster and he said, Jim, I can bring you a lot more work. Well, this was great news. I was all ears. I said, tell me more. And he said, I can bring you a lot of work, But just when I do, and you make your estimate, add on to about 10% and give that back to me when we're completed. Well, this sounded great. I was very young at that point and kind of naive, I would suggest. And I was all in favor of that, but yet I heard myself say no. I was not involved, not interested. And I wondered about that. It just didn't feel right. So where does ethics come from? What is ethics to begin with? According to Webster, ethics is a system of moral principles. So let's look at those moral principles. Where do we pull them from? The very fact, again, Webster calls them a moral principle, which the word moral suggests some level of religiosity. So religion is a great source for ethics. It's a lot of good, positive teaching, except for the fact that there's a lot of people not involved in religion. Shall we say that all atheists cannot be ethical? I'm not sure that that works. Culture is a major source of where we learn our ethics. But as I teach in prisons and learn about the parenting of some of these people, I question whether culture is really always a positive source. Philosophy teaches an awfully lot, but do we have to be a philosopher before we can be ethical? I used the intuition in my opening, but intuition doesn't always serve us well. It can be affected. Psychological. The psychologists would talk about meta-ethics, absolute and normative ethics. Laws, maybe the laws, but then again, is that Nuremberg trials kind of showed that laws aren't always ethical. Political power, and when we're talking about political power, we're talking about Machiavelli, who said might makes right. Or are we talking about what caused Abraham Lincoln to be elected, who said right makes might? So neither of those are a good source of ethics. Then again, what was ethics started for to begin with? Ethics basically came out as 5, 6, 7,000 years ago, as gatherers started to accumulate into larger communities. We needed some form of working together. And of course, fortunately, we had Charlton Heston that came down off the stormy mountain carrying the big stones with the 10 Commandments. And the 10 Commandments certainly are a very religious, very good way. But in reality, the 10 Commandments are a way of working with your neighbors, the way of working amongst themselves. So again, the ethics is a way that we can work together. The interesting thing as ombudsman, I've been an ombudsman in our district now for about 8 or 9 years. I took the job because we're Rotarians. I knew I would have nothing to do. Not quite, but not a lot, but about every year I get 1 or 2 situations that we need to deal with. And when I have a situation where I'm called in as an ombudsman, I will sit with one side and listen to all of that story. Then I'll sit with the other side and listen to that story. What I learned, the interesting thing is both sides, the very first words out of their mouth, Jim, they're not living the 4-way test. We're throwing the 4-way test up as a banner. And I remember Abraham Lincoln again shared with a friend, he said, you know, both sides claim to be fighting for God. We often use our ethics as a badge of honor. But the instant we do that, the instant we claim they're not living the 4-way test, then it becomes a way of hiding from what are the facts, what are the truth. Also, when we throw up the ethics as a badge of honor, we begin to judge the individual rather than looking at the situation. So it's necessary not to ever, must be careful not to use it as a badge of honor so that we can focus on issues. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to teach a four-way test program to a borderline school. It's a school where they had been kicked out of the high school, but yet they're not incarcerated, but they're right in between. And so Golden, Colorado has the school for these borderline individuals. And they're middle-aged, and I put together a four-way test, but I wanted to talk about what is ethics and what is values, and why should they care about values and looking at coming up with a structure for life. So I would have them draw a line and mark it off in tens, about 10 marks, and then tell me on this line of 1 through 10, where are your values after we talked about that? And of course, they would give me a score of 7, 8, or even a 9 on their values. And we talk about that, but then I would have them draw another line and mark it off in tens. And on a scale of 1 to 10, where are your actions? But the actions would always come out about 4, 5, or 6. And then we would discuss about how do we align our actions with our values and why should you care? And with all of us, we talk about values, we repeat the four-way test, but it's less about the words we use and more about the actions. I many times wake up in the morning and I say shower, 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 and I realize I just can't get any cleaner no matter how many times I say shower. So I actually have to step in and get wet before it makes a difference. The same with the four-way test. What are our actions? So in all of this, philosophers will talk about two basic concepts of ethics: the deontological or teleological. And the deontological is there, as you see, it comes from the Greek, means obligation, whereas the teleological comes from telos, meaning the outcome. And I want to share a little story. An airplane coming back from Europe, heading to America, and not unlike the 777 that flew over Denver a few days ago, and the engine exploded and lost the engine. The pilot knows that when an engine goes, that plane can only fly about 200 miles on one engine. So it needs to find a place to sit down. Well, this plane coming back from Europe happened to find an island and was able to land. On that plane, there were two gentlemen, a younger gentleman and a very elderly gentleman carrying a large briefcase. The plane landed, but the elderly gentleman was severely damaged. He had made friends with this younger gentleman and gave him the briefcase, telling him, this briefcase is filled with lots of money, which I was taking to Mr. Steinbrenner to build up the New York Yankees. So would you deliver that? And he promised the elderly gentleman he would deliver that money to Mr. Steinbrenner for the save the New York Yankees. On his way there, he made it back to the US, but on his way to deliver the money, he got a call from a friend in the UN saying there's a major disaster. We have millions of refugees that are starving, and we need to find a lot of money. So how many of you would take that briefcase and deliver it to the UN to save a lot of children? And you can speak up and unmute yourself and speak up and just vocally, how many of you would actually take the money to the UN?
I would.
So I see some of you would. How many of you would take it to Steinbrenner as committed? And many there. And that's what we have with the deontological and teleological. Going back, the deontological means we are committed. It's absolute. I will always, always tell the truth and do the right. Teleological means let's look at the outcome. What is the greater good that we should look at? Now, the interesting thing about that, let's take a look at our four-way test, the greatness of the four-way test. The first two say, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? The is it, they start with the words is it, which tends to be fairly deontological. That's fairly absolute. I always tell the truth. I always am fair to those concerned. But if we go to the next two, they start with the will it build goodwill? Will it be beneficial? More outcome based. So, and that was kind of a shock to me because I like to think that my ethics are pretty absolute, that I'm always absolute. But when we look at what's been going on currently in the hospitals, where doctors literally are given the choice of choosing, in some cases, who dies, who doesn't, what is the truth? When the doctor meets the patient who's just had a heart attack and now he has to tell him you also have cancer, how do you do that without adding that additional? And of course, for all of you guys, we know that the absolute answer is always yes when she asks, does this dress make me look heavy? So we must be tempered with ours, and we must balance that the right and wrong. I've often wanted to write an article about the color of the lies. So we tell the little white lies to be safe. But when are those little white lies turning a little gray? So it becomes different. It is important, it is essential for us to have a value system and be consciously aware and remind ourselves of what that is. Is it the four-way test? Is it based on anything else? On the class with the children, I would give them a page of 60 different words of values, and they would pick their own, and then we talk about why they would pick their own. Years ago, I was involved in the National Speakers Association. There was a gentleman then, and this was 20 years ago, said, Jim, the challenge today, there are so many choices and stress comes from so many choices. And I guess I've never believed that. I believe stress comes from greater stress comes from not knowing exactly who we are and what's important to us. When we are committed to our value system, decisions become easier. Interestingly enough, I taught a course on nature versus nurture and come across the information that over 70% of doctor visits are stress related. We don't know who we are. When we're talking about fringe groups, gangs, it's people that live with a corner of the blanket missing. We talk about the corner of the blanket. Are we collected? The corners are, first corner represents social interaction. Are we connected with our families? Are we connected with friends? Do we have a good social interaction? Do we have a good sense of self-worth? Do we see value in ourselves? Are we of physical and of mental health? And do we have a sense of security, being financial? Do we know where our next meal is coming from? When any corner of that blanket is missing, that's where we get fringe groups, fundamentalism, gangs, looking to fill that blanket. But the value of having this value system that we are so secure with, it gives us those four corners. And I'll never forget, I love Marshall Rosenberg, who is the guru on nonviolent communication, who said, every criticism, judgment, and expression of anger is a tragic expression of an unmet need. So having a clear understanding of our ethics is essential to fill the four corners and essential for a functioning society. After I sold my boat dealership, I had it for a short while, a chain store of accessory stores, for marine accessory stores. And they were all in shopping center environments and strip mall environments. And every one of those buildings going in was a 40-page lease with 40 pages of addendum. And I remember asking my attorney one time, I said, is all of this really necessary? And he looked at me, he said, Jim, with 40 pages of leases and 40 pages of addendums, we still end up in court. It reminds me of a comment that James Madison said. He was sitting amongst his friends and as they were writing the Constitution for us all. He made the comment, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. You must first enable the government to control the governed. And the next place, oblige it to control itself. A sense of values is essential. So a sense of ethics is essential for us to reduce stress, making our decisions in life easier, creating a functional society, how we get along together, a stronger sense of self, a greater sense of value, more positive attitude. And in 2009, many authors, business authors, talked about it was the businesses that had a sense of ethics that returned to profitability much quicker than others. Ethics necessitates us to begin to think beyond ourselves. So in the end, where do ethics come from? In the end, it comes from you, your value system. What's important to you? It may come from a list, may come from the four-way test, but it's up to you. And I want to close with a reading from a compass adjusting manual. Of course, we're talking about the ethical compass, but this is the instructions pulled out of a compass on how to set the compass. All compasses are vulnerable to interference, which will produce errors called deviation. It is the owner-operator, the helmsman's responsibility to make sure the compass is properly installed and compensated. Compensation is the act of correcting for deviation aboard your life. So let's check our compasses and let's eliminate negative interferences and have a positive, happy life, living ethically with your compass. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Jim. At this point, I'm going to introduce the people who will introduce our TKL Lamb Award winner this year. First is Jane Brown, our president nominee and all-around good person. And then past president, longtime member and general good guy, Charlie Locke. And they're going to introduce and award this year's TKL Lamb. Take it away, Joanne.
Thank you, Dana Timaeus, committee chair of the TKL Lamb Award for Business Ethics. It is my distinct pleasure to yield the chair to Charles Locke to offer a few comments. Charles is an admired fellow active Rotarian. He is very familiar with TKL Lamb, and Charles should receive perfect attendance during COVID because each and every week he drives to join us at Lamar University in these Zoom meetings. So we're very grateful to him. And now I yield to Mr. Charles Locke.
Joanne, thank you so much. As Joanne told you, my name is Charles Locke, and it's really an honor for me to be here today to help in this presentation of the TKL Lamb Senior Award for Business Ethics. Mr. Lamb, and I call him Mr. Lamb because he was a real close friend of my dad's, but he was known as Kelsey Lamb. He was a wonderful, wonderful gentleman and did so many great things. He was president of the Rotary Club of Beaumont in 1942-43, and then he later became district governor in 1951-52. I was lucky enough to have the privilege of serving as president of Rotary in, it was about 18 years later, 1969, 70. Many things that have happened in Rotary and also the city of Beaumont have been a direct result of T. Kelsey Lamb. He has done so many things, wonderful things for our city and for our organization. And there's just a lot to tell about T. Kelsey Lamb. I look forward to the time when we can move Rotary back to the Elegante Hotel. And I hope that those of you who joined the meeting will come by our table and let me give you a quick view of what Kelsey Lamb meant to all of us through the things that he did for Beaumont and for Rotary. It'll give me a lot of pleasure to be able to tell you some of those things. I do thank you for your attention today, and I will now turn the program back over to Joanne Brown, who will make this year's award presentation to a very, very worthy recipient.
Thank you,
Joanne?
Mr. Locke. Thank you. The T. Kelsey Lamb Senior Award for Business Ethics is presented annually to a Beaumont Rotarian who consistently exhibits ethical standards represented by the Rotary four-way test in his or her chosen vocation. Our club is presenting this annual award today. This year's Rotarian nominee and recipient of the T. Kelsey Lamb Senior Award was proposed by Charles Locke and is an outstanding example of the application of the four-way test in everyday life, and is one who has a unique way of keeping the four-way test in their thoughts daily. Since joining Rotary, this member's dedication has grown and is grounded in the four-way test with multifaceted leadership that is continually on the rise. Rotary Club of Beaumont benefits in fundraising through this person's knowledge of wine during the plannings for Wine Down with Rotary, and at the other end of the spectrum, the involvement that has been dedicated to our efforts to share the four-way test with the youth of our community. This kind soul was devoted to Rotary High School Youth Service Awards. And as the future shifted and Rotary Scholarship applications usurped service award applications, this person guided many students into secondary educational opportunities. When this club member speaks, it is beneficial to all concerned. The member is known for being a strong influence at and has untold dedication to Rotary Youth Leadership Awards, better known as RYLA, where this member makes wow presentations in ethics, leadership, and social media guidance. In 1998, this kind-hearted individual received the Michelle F. Mahaffey Pro Bono Lawyer of the Year Award. In 2012, was the recipient of the Family Services of Southeast Texas Family Advocate of the Year and the Texas CASA Big Voices for Little Texans Judge of the Year Award. Ever so humble, so much of what this person does, we have not seen, don't know about. What we do know is that it is the truth, it is fair to all concerned, it builds goodwill and better friendships, and it is beneficial to all concerned, both in his daily life as a Rotarian and as judge of the 279th District Court. Please join Charles.
You're muted, Joanne.
Please join Charles Locke and me in a virtual clap or hurrah as we recognize the Honorable J. Randy Shelton as the recipient of the 2021 T. Kelsey Lamb Senior Award for Business Ethics.
Congratulations, Judge. You're on if you'd like to make a remark or two. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. I'm really honored and I'm very surprised. I'm kind of speechless. Now I feel guilty for accusing the dog of eating the last cinnamon roll this morning, but I promise to make that right. Well, thank you all very much. This is a huge honor, and I'm just again speechless. But thank you guys very, very much. I appreciate it.
You're certainly well deserving, Judge. And President Cindy, if you want to take back over, we yield the chair.
Thank you for a wonderful program, and congratulations to my Raleigh buddy, Judge Randy Shelton, on his award today. In honor of our guest speaker, Mr. Jim Halderman, the Rotary Club of Beaumont will be making a donation to Rotary International in the area of peace and conflict resolution in his name. So we thank you so much, Mr. Halderman, for sharing with us today. And I really like the way that you put it as far as reminding us to check our compass, because it's something that is definitely something we need to do on a regular basis. Thank you so much.
My honor. Thank you.
Now a few announcements. There are several opportunities for you to be able to serve in the community this weekend. So if you're able to sign up for any of those, please do so. Our speaker next week will be the Lamar Rotaract Club, and they're going to tell us how they are celebrating World Rotaract Week and how the club has been serving through the year. Reminder to any board members, if you can hang around just a short while after the meeting, we'll decide on a date to substitute for the flag project that we had to cancel. And so let's go on to the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Something we've really celebrated today in honoring our T. Kelsey Lamb Award winner. First, is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Second, is it fair
Fair
to
to
all?
all concerned.
Third, will it build
Build goodwill and better
Friendships.
friendships.
And fourth, will it be
Will it be
beneficial to all
beneficial to all
concerned?
concerned.
Have a good week and go out and find opportunities to lead and serve.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Judge.
Bye.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halderman. We really appreciate you.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.